So yeah.
Welcome, everybody. We're just waiting for the microphones to all get turned on.
Hello, folks. Hi, thanks for coming, everybody. My name's Colin Brandt. I'm the president of the Parkdale Community Association. And welcome everyone from Parkdale, welcome everyone from Ward 7, and from folks outside Ward 7. Welcome to the best ward in Calgary. Thanks for the muted clapping, I appreciate it. See, the bad jokes, I promise they'll stop quickly. Anyway, I always say to everybody why I do this work. It's because of my passion for bad coffee and folding tables. As you can see, we've got the folding tables. The coffee's actually pretty good, I promise, so please help yourself. Washrooms around the back if you don't know that already. Other than that, we're going to get started right away. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Judy Hode. Judy's been the chair of our Parkdale Planning and Development Group for 6 years now, and is entirely and eminently qualified to host this forum tonight. So thank you very much, candidates, for coming, and we're so excited to have you. It looks like we might still have a bit of AV stuff going on, so we might just kind of have a hard start whenever things go on, but if anybody has any questions or concerns, questions are in the back. I think they're almost all full, and we're moderating them up here, so thanks so much for coming. Be back with you soon.
Thanks, Colin. Welcome, everybody. Colin's other role tonight is bouncer. So if I make a call that people are out of order, Colin will help escort you out, because I'm not big enough to do that. My fascination with municipal politics goes a long way back, but I've been involved in and around the city of Calgary for about 30 years, so I love elections. I'm a bit of a political junkie, so I'm looking forward to tonight, and I hope everyone else is too. If everyone saw the invitation, the only thing we're asking is that everybody be respectful, please, of each other and of the candidates, and no hooting and hollering. This is a forum, it's not a rally, and that's why we asked people not to wear buttons. And we're going to try and have a reason to debate. So I'm going to start off by, you can see the heads at the front, you might not be able to read the names, so I'm just going to introduce individuals by name, and then we'll get started. We may have to pass a microphone back and forth to do that. So over on my right, Vince with the orange card is the timekeeper. He'll put it up and down and tell me when I have to cut people off. Over in this corner will be Steve and Bill. And I just want to say a special thanks to Bill. Bill is our staff person at Parkdale Community. He put this event together, and he's worked really hard. So Bill's going to help sort the questions that you are writing. And if you have a question that needs to be brought forward as the meeting goes on, who's picking up questions? Bill? Other questions during the hold them up, okay, if you have a new question. So on my far right is Margot Aftergood. Next to Margot on my right, and I have to pronounce this, is Mark Hayduk. I'm told if I know more about hockey, I would know how to say that. On my left is Drew Farrell. Next to her is Dean Braun, and at the far end of this table is Brent Alexander. And before they get started, their first piece is they each give a little presentation on why they're running. And it's a very short one. I think you have 3 minutes from each candidate where they're going to talk to you. So I'll just let them do that. I'm going to go to start with from right to left. After that, I may go random order, okay? Just so we don't give everybody the first and last position. That's all right with everybody. And Margot, as soon as you get a mic, we won't start timing you.
to. Hi. I'm Margot Aftergood, and I'm running to be your next Ward 7 councillor. I've been on a 6-month job interview. I've knocked on way over 11,000 doors, and it seems like everyone thinks they know me, but let me tell you about me. I believe the job of the councillor is to work for you, the resident. I've lived in Rosedale for over 20 years. I've been an active member of my community association, volunteered on numerous charity casinos in Rosedale and West Hillhurst, participated in many bottle drives, community cleanups, various school activities in almost all communities throughout the ward. It's where my 3 children grew up and went from elementary to junior high school and senior high school. I think if you want to represent the ward, you need to know the ward. I've heard story after story about how you feel powerless to stop the overdevelopment in your community. We have developments that don't follow the ARP, Area Redevelopment Plan, but are approved anyway. Here in Parkdale, you have a serious problem with laneway homes and the lack of design control. This is compounded by the city and builders' lack of respect and enforcement of regulations and a seemingly lack of interest in working in consultation with the community. Many of you, complaints and petitions are ignored. Phone calls are not returned. This is unacceptable. You have no voice, and it seems no one cares. You deserve better. Ward 7 deserves better. You must be informed, involved, and consulted on any changes that affect the value of your home. No to blanket approval of illegal secondary suites. These fire traps cannot be legalized. Safety is above all. Also, let's talk about the issue that's causing tears at the door. Residential parking passes. Seniors and home care people are very upset about this change. Again, no consultation. No thought given to the problems it would cause. If elected, I would fight to immediately reverse this policy, give people the choice. They can keep the old paper system if they want, or change to the new paperless system. The city needs to listen to people, not just dictate. I announced in March, term limits. 3 terms maximum. This job is about public service, not career opportunities. I'm interviewing for this job because I have the grit, determination, and passion to fight for you. I want to change how you're treated, change how council treats your money and your wallet. I want to protect your home's value and make Ward 7 neighborhoods some of the best in Calgary. This election is about getting your voice back. It's about judging performance after 4 years and looking ahead.
Thank you. Next, do you have the mic that works,
No,
Mark?
the mic decided to stop working.
We paid a lot of money to rent these mics. I'm not sure they'll hear you.
Can you hear me in the back? We're good? Thank you. No, I don't need, it's fine. I've got a cold, and so I've got to talk sparingly. That's kind of the problem. I'm Mark Eduk. I've got a business here in Parkdale. I run the wine store. Probably a lot of you may know me from that thing. I actually decided to run after consulting with Parkdale, Montgomery, Varsity, University Heights, and then my own home community of Brentwood. One of the reasons I ran is one of the things that I've seen consistently and that's troubled me quite a bit is how the city's been treating its seniors and those disadvantaged. I've seen a couple of really bad cases of the city bullying people into decisions when it comes to redeveloping their homes, putting in infills. It's bothered me quite a bit. Notably, we've seen not just in Midfield, but actually in Montgomery and in up in Mount Pleasant, suicides based on the pressure that the city has put on residents. I don't like bullies, and I'm actually kind of tired of seeing this happen in my community and the communities surrounding, and it's one of the reasons I decided to run. The other reason I ran, it's probably a controversial issue that separates me a little bit from everyone else, is I want to put fluoride back in the water supply. feel free to ask me questions about it. I'm more than happy to answer them as well. I am running a paperless campaign, so a lot of the questions that you may have, I can direct you to VoteMark, so VOTEMAREK.ca or .com, makes no difference. And you can reach me directly there, either my cell phone or on my email. Hopefully I put my cell phone on mute. Anyway, if you have any questions, feel free. We have the moderators up, and yeah, I'll try and keep it short. You're welcome, Vince.
Thank you. Thanks. Next speaker is Drew Farrell.
Thank you. Welcome tonight, and thanks to the Parkdale community for hosting. Is that cutting in and out? I know how hard all of you work to make your community better, and thanks to my fellow candidates. It's cutting out. Okay. Thanks to my fellow candidate, respectful debate makes for a healthy democracy. Parkdale is a gorgeous neighborhood, experiencing a tremendous amount of change. I work closely with your community associations. I don't.
Test.
No? Oh.
Sorry, everyone.
Test.
Do what Mark does.
Is there anyone here who knows how to work these systems?
A little bit, but I gotta watch this. It's kind of too important. Yeah. Yeah, this is actually kind of really expensive.
Yeah, I get it.
Nobody wants to see me tap dance, but just be a second. Keep writing down questions. You may never be able to.
David, he knows how to work with it. He said he can.
Test. Lights, camera, action.
I'm going to start again. I want to thank the Parkdale community for hosting this evening. It's such a good turnout. And I know how hard all of you work to make your community better. And I want to thank my fellow candidates. Respectful debate helps build a healthier democracy. And Parkdale is an extraordinary community. It's a beautiful neighborhood experiencing a tremendous amount of change. I work closely with your community association and your planning committee on their various issues and opportunities. I help find funding for your community garden, improve your pedestrian safety, or ways to build community capacity. And I see their input when making planning decisions. You have a number of live issues right now. One is a row housing application, and the community asked me to table it at council so they could get engaged further with the applicant, and I did just that. Parkdale, along with other Ward 7 communities, are having similar issues with some infill development. After lengthy debate at Council and using the feedback from communities like Parkdale, I was able to gain support from Council colleagues for a full review of the infill rules. If done well, laneway suites can be a charming addition to your community. They help seniors age in place and act as a mortgage helper. You were concerned, though, with the quality and size of laneway suites. So I brought forward a motion to develop new laneway design guidelines, and the city will be engaging on those new guidelines. Work is already underway and will be coming in 2018. I'm proud to be your voice on council. I enjoy working with the people of Ward 7 about the kind of community they want to live in and the kind of future they want for Calgary. And we've been accomplishing much over the last term. Curbside recycling, green bins, better transit, pedestrian safety, Green Line LRT, the largest project in Alberta's history. All tough decisions that help build a stronger city to prepare Calgary for the future. With your help, I've been able to deliver projects that make life better for Ward 7 and for Calgary. So why am I running again? It's because together we've been building a great city of great communities, and I have the tenacity, vision, and energy to do more for Ward 7 and for Calgary. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Dean Braun, and I'm a third-generation Calgarian, and I've worked both for and run different businesses in the city. I've been an employee, I've been an employer. I understand both sides of the employment equation. And I've lived in Ward 7 for almost 30 years. I've lived in my current house for just over 20. Both currently and in the recent past, I volunteered at the National Music Centre, Vertigo Theatre, Sept, the Recycling Council of Alberta, and many other worthy community organizations over the years. I'm committed to making Calgary and Ward 7 the best place to live, work, and raise a family. I'm committed to see new leadership at our City Council, a new refreshing group who doesn't penalize success, but rather partners with respective communities, works with business, and helps promote success for all. We need to get back to being a city where companies come here willingly and aren't scared away, or squeezed out and shut down because of exorbitant taxes. We need to ensure our seniors and our most vulnerable are protected, not kicked out on the street like our current mayor and council, which includes Ms. Farrell, have done and decided to do with Midfield Park. Midfield Park residents whose eviction curiously comes into effect on September 30th, and according to one of the letters sent to residents from the city just recently, if they can't find new living arrangements, they can find shelter at the mustard seed or the homeless shelter. I thought we were working to end homelessness, not grow it. The adversarial environment that's sprouting from our current city council needs to stop. Calgary needs to get back to a business-friendly city, a city who works with business so we all succeed, not a city who makes doing what needs to be done more and more difficult. On October 16th, vote for your Conservative choice, Dean Braun, as someone who cares about my fellow Calgarians, vulnerable or not.
Thank you, Parkdale, for organizing the session tonight. It is very important for our democracy that everybody be able to ask the questions and hear the same answers from each of us. So that is what makes these sessions so important to me, I think, and hopefully to you. As past president of the West Sellers Community Association, I've been extremely involved in communities, not only in local communities, but also our larger city community on various boards, Families Matter, and a few foundations. And one of four individuals who forced the city to re-engage the communities, to actually engage the communities in a thoughtful process to make the Crowchild Trail redevelopment actually occur in a way that is much more beneficial to our surrounding communities and not just a 1970s version of a freeway through LA. Why I'm running? As I meet with residents across this ward, three needs have become eminently clear. There is a lack of trust of the current council. People want to be able to trust their councillor again. That is why I refuse to take any money from any corporation or union. It may be legal, but it is not ethical. We need to work with these parties, but not to be seen to be working for them. We also must trust that our decisions are being based on evidence, such as the decision to remove fluoride, which was based on nothing except for personal desire to remove it. All dental, medical, and public health indicated that it was beneficial to maintain it. There was no evidence otherwise. We need to be able to trust that our ARPs, our area development plans, and our building regulations will be respected and implemented. And when they are not implemented correctly, that there will be repercussions to the owners and to the builders. Lastly, we need to be able to trust that our contracts as individuals, such as those at Midfield, will be respected and not be torn up and thrown aside. Secondly, residents want to plan for the success of their whole community. Our communities are so much more than density and zoning, yet that is all that is currently planned for our inner city. We have to address our aging and failing infrastructure, restore our services, and rebuild and renew our community and recreation facilities to serve the needs of our existing and new neighbors. My urban design education allows me to see beyond the band of developers and incorporate the whole needs and voice of the communities into future plans. Ward 7 wants a person who can manage through the financial crisis we're experiencing at City Hall. I have 22 years in financial industry, working with public sector, private sector, and not-for-profit organizations, both large and small. I understand the needs in the community, but also how to get value for money. Skill sets that are sorely lacking at City Hall. I am Brent Alexander. I want to be your independent voice on Council for Ward 7. Get your voice back.
No. I'm watching Bill with his walker and with his cord. I'm sorry. I don't want to pick him up. So I'm going to read the first question and then randomly draw the first person to answer, and then I'll go through it in that direction. Each of the speakers have a pink card called a wild card. And either during this session or the next one, they can actually rebut a point for a 1 minute period of time. So if something comes up, they've already had their turn, they want to speak again, they get a one. They only have 2 cards for the whole rest of the evening. So it should be interesting to see how they choose to use them. So the first question is, what do you think are the 3 most pressing issues facing the Parkdale community? And I know not everyone here is from Parkdale, so if you want to answer speaking about Montgomery or University Heights or West Hillhurst or Hillhurst Sunnyside, you can also throw an issue in there. The first person is Dean.
2 minutes.
Thank you. I think one of the main issues that I think is overriding for most communities is densification, be it over-densification, under-densification, or densification because it's what 15 people on city council decide they want to do versus what the community association wants to do. I think people move into a community, they know what that community is zoned for, that they know what that community's culture is, what that community is, they know why they moved to that community. So we need to make it so that if a community wants to change their zoning or their densification, they should do it as a whole. I know in order to change parking regulations, you need over 80% agreement. So I think that should be at least the threshold to change any zoning in a community. And then here's the list of rules, check, 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 go ahead and build it. If you put an X beside one of those rules on building in your community, sorry, either change your plan so you can change your X to a check mark, or go somewhere else where you can put checks in all the boxes. Simple as that. Keep it simple. We need to make it simple and easy. Laneway housing, I know, is one of the issues here. And I mean, it more or less relates back to what the densification and I think some of the overriding issues is getting approvals and working around some of the rules and whatnot. We need to, again, let's make it simple. Let's simplify the process, make it easy for people to do what they need to and want to do. In terms of a third issue, traffic and transportation. That's, again, it's overriding, I think, the entire city. We need to make things better. We need to work with each community to find out what their needs are specifically in their community and figure out how to get people around the city easier and more efficiently.
Thank you. Next speaker is Brent.
Thank you. There's going to be a lot of repetition tonight, but redevelopment is definitely a major issue, not just here in Parkdale, but in every single community in Ward 7. And it really goes back to respect for our area development plans and also the regulations. Having new regulations really does not solve the issue of language houses when the existing regulations are not being respected. We need to ensure that our city, whether the bureaucrats or the politicians, are respecting the plans that are in place and respecting the regulations that are in place, because those are contracts with the community to respect the existing community. That is primary. The other reality, though, is that as with all other communities in this ward, we do have aging infrastructure issues. Again, there is no coherent plan at the city to deal with our communities as a whole. We have to hope that there's some silo that's going to understand what our individual needs are on this on simple issues, on single issues, and hope that they actually address them. We know that doesn't happen well with bureaucrats, and the silos don't function well together. We need to make sure we have coherent community plans to make sure that all of our needs are actually being addressed. Lastly, a lot of those issues around lack of community facilities, for example, can be addressed across jurisdiction, but we need somebody who's willing to open up the dialogue with organizations like the Calgary Board of Education to share resources, whether it's gym spaces and/or libraries. We know how to do this. We do it already in other areas of the city with the CBE and with the Catholic School Board, but we don't do it in the inner city. And we need to change that for everyone's benefit, including the school boards. And the other item with the school boards is bringing back community schools. Parkdale is suffering as one of their major building blocks for community is no longer theirs as a community. This needs to change, and it'll only change again with that fulsome discussion with these organizations. Thank you.
One second, I'm just kind of saving my thoughts here.
You take a short time and you're cutting into.
You can cut into my time, that's fine. It's legit. Thank you.
We talk about densification in such a way it's an abstract concept, and I think one of the problems that we face as Calgarians is looking at it from a real perspective. If you look at a city like Vancouver, urban densification did something very interesting. Well, a lot of the homes in Parkdale that you see, especially the 1960 and earlier, go for about $2.89 million in Vancouver. It's great because densification made baby boomers extremely wealthy. And this is kind of the problem we face. It's more of a generational gap that we're looking at in terms of an affordability perspective. One, it's nice to see that, the people who built our communities are getting rewarded. On the other hand, it's younger people who are actually getting priced out of the market. That's one thing that we don't consider with densification. The second I would address was something that we talked with Spruce Hill Community Association. Spruce Hill Community Association had a 300% increase in density without any of the accompanying infrastructure needs. Not everybody's going to get on a bike. That's kind of the bottom line. And the other thing that we're looking at that I hear consistently from people who talk about Parkdale is also taking a look at the interchange on Shaganappy. The city wants to put up, I think it's a total of 45,000 more occupants at the university development. And all those people are going to go down Shaganappy and onto Bellenest and 3rd for a bit, then Parkdale Boulevard, and then Memorial again. And that's another issue. We're
also critical that it fit in with the neighborhood, it respect the heritage of the neighborhood, and it brings reinvestment in the public realm. And that's something that we've been doing at council, is requiring a redevelopment levy. And that redevelopment levy will go into a fund and then will help with that aging infrastructure. We need to ensure that development is high quality and built to last. One thing that hasn't been mentioned is flood resilience. Flood, this is a river community. I know you were spared during the 2013 flood, but preparing for a flood disaster that is much bigger than that we've had before, and we know that that will come at some point. We need to prepare our communities for that, to ensure that that communities are safe, and so is their infrastructure. And we're working on that. Transportation safety and transportation choice. Parkdale and West Hillhurst have the highest ratio of cyclists in the city. It's because you're so well situated by the pedestrian pathways or river pathways. But we hear constantly about pedestrian safety, cut through traffic. And especially with the cancer center going in, we expect far more people traveling through the neighborhood. That brings associated problems like parking. And those are things that we can help with, but we've got almost every community in the city asking for neighborhood traffic studies, and so we're picking them off one at a time. I would say I've got several more, but I'm going to stop there because I could stop at 3.
Just can I have a question again? It's about what am I hearing in Parkdale?
What do you think are the 3 most pressing issues facing Parkdale community?
The most important issue I've heard is about the rising of taxes. People's property taxes going up every year, and they're not getting value for the dollar. That's what I hear constantly. They see more densification, but they figure, well, okay, more people in the area, that their taxes should go down, but that's not the case. They also feel that there's a lot of wasteful spending in City Council. The huge furor on the art project was not about the art. It was about people are sitting at their desk or at their dining room table, and they're paying mortgage, taxes, and groceries, and they don't see how they're going to afford to live in their house anymore. They need to see some help about job creation. They want to see the city looking after them so they can afford to live in their house, so we'll be able to do all this spending that needs to be done in areas. And they don't see this city, all they see the city taxing them and not helping them, maybe working in a way to start a job creation or getting more people back working.
Thank you, everybody. I do have some comments to add, but I'll follow the rules. The Parkdale community is frustrated with their inability to have their input considered when planning and development proposals are considered by the city. Tell us how you would support and represent Parkdale on planning issues, and how you would effectively influence other councillors and administration on our behalf. I think we all know that a councillor is only one vote. The first person to answer would be Brent.
Thank you. First and foremost, we need to be respectful of the rules. And right now, we're not, as an organization, the city being the organization. We need to ensure that people understand what the actual rules of engagement are when it comes to redevelopment, that change is seen as positive in communities, but they also want to understand that the change that is being held and happening in communities is respectful of the existing community and is not going to overwhelm it or be negative in any fashion. That's why we have area redevelopment plans to guide this change, and that's what's already been improved, and work with communities as a whole. We don't want to piecemeal take them apart, because to do so really reneges the entire reason why we have these area redevelopment plans. I think we need to be truthful. I think the sitting councillor needs to be truthful that if you're not going to respect them, you might as well throw them out and pretend instead of pretending that they're actually there. So we need to start with respect of the existing. Those are the envelopes in which change is supposed to happen within communities, not the stepping off point for more. The second one is in regards to regulations. Again, it doesn't matter if we're changing regulations if we can't even respect the existing regulations for laneway houses. The point is we have to start respecting the rules that are on the books, and when things are approved within the regulation, people are much more willing to accept change because they understood how it was put together in the first place. Not to mention, when items are approved, they're often disregarded in regards to, and they're often built outside of the approval, and yet they only need to go back for leniency. This is completely inappropriate that there's not actual conditions to bring it back within the approval or simply tear down the laneway house. We need to change this, and when you enforce the rules, things will change.
Your voice does matter. And your community's voice matters. And you've got a very strong community association who represents you well. And we have got a great relationship with your community planning committee. So as an example, with this last application, the row house application, the community asked for more time. They wanted to consult with the residents, and they wanted to build a relationship with the applicant. And so council agreed to send that back. There was another application that is going to be very contentious in your community. I know you had an open house. Their same applicant has a pretty difficult relationship with City Council and City Hall, and the last 3 applications that he's brought forward have failed on council. So don't think that you don't have a voice. You do, and it has power. Council does, though, have overarching policy on how we want to build a city. So we're talking about a more compact city, a city that encourages us growing up rather than out. That needs to be done in a sensitive way. It needs to be done with the community in mind so we don't destroy what we love. The contractors also have an incredible responsibility to do what they say, and we're seeing more and more contractors building what they want and afterwards asking for forgiveness. And I brought forward a notice of motion for contractor responsibility. It was approved by council. We now have new rules on how to enforce that contractor responsibility, including the damage that they're doing to their neighboring property, their neighbor's property, as well as public property. And that's making a difference, but it's changing is 15 seconds. I think I'm done. Thank you, Vince.
One of the questions I have is what exactly does represent Parkdale with respect to growth exactly mean? Is the person who asked the question in the audience?
The first 3 questions were put together by a pool of community association members and board members and planning committee members.
The City Council is never opposed to growth, mostly because it's a really good tax grab. I mean, if you can get one property that pays you, say, $3,000-4,000 in taxes, and you can have a developer build up an 8-plex, and that gives you $24,000, you can see where the numbers add up in line. With respect to Drew's earlier point, damages to citizens, that's easy. You go to Home Road, go behind the Safeway, and you take a look at the old lady who City Council let 2 developments go into her property without fair compensation. Where was that? Where was those checks and balances? I think there needs to be a stronger community walk and grassroots organization in terms of helping them. And frankly, as I go from community to community, they really need events. Events, when I was on the community association, is brilliant because Parkdale does have somebody who interacts with City Council and City Planning very strongly and defends Parkdale's rights. When you look at some of the other communities, the outliers like Mount Pleasant or Montgomery, they don't have events. Everybody needs events. And so I think to represent communities, there needs to be somebody in a position from either an engineering background or a financial, like accounting background, who can read the numbers and read the plans to understand what's going to go into your community. Without it, like I said, you take a look at the people on Home Road and how the city's let them build in without any fair compensation. And it's a 88-year-old woman who's on an oxygen tank, and she's basically been bullied by the city.
Thank you. Marco, you're next.
Your first person to talk to about development in your area is your councillor, and your councillor should be on your side. And the conversation should come between you and the community association and the councillor. And when that person brings, this is what's happening, what do you think? And your voice matters. Yes, I'm for that, or no. Unfortunately, there was a letter written from this community association that was written to the councillors that there's a pattern of non-compliance for laneway homes in our community, and this is the third one in 2017. So the community has to go, get together, write letters, get petitions, and say, I don't want this happening in my area. And the councillor should be the one promoting you, you're not supposed to be fighting with the councillor about, I don't want this development, I don't want this to happen, or we need more consultation, and that isn't happening. And that's why some development is good and a lot of development is bad.
Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, this comes back to listening to the community associations. That voice seems to have disappeared over the years. Relating to something personal, when I renovated my house, the first place I had to go for approvals was my community association. Now it seems that community association is just another piece of paper in the large stack of paper that is looked at by council, which to me, again, I don't think council should be spending the time looking at individual proposals, applications. They should be building strong policy that is done with the community associations, their board of directors. They should be developing the policy that respects each community. The community develops their own rules so that when you go through, you want to develop something on your property, if you can go check, 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 go ahead and build it. If you put an X beside any of those issues, sorry, change your plans to meet all the other, so that you can change your X to a check mark, and then if you don't want to change your plans, then look for a community that you can put check marks beside everything. Simple as that. We need to simplify things, get rid of the red tape. When you go and visit the city and you want to develop something, you should be able to sit down with people from the parks, from roads, from all the departments at once, rather than have a meeting with one department, then come back and have a meeting with the other department, then the other department. And by the time you come back around again, the person that you were talked to originally at that first department has changed. So now you've got to start all over again. That's got to stop. We need to do things smarter and better and work with the community associations so that voice is heard again, and do what the community associations want to do, not what 15 councillors have decided is their picture of the city.
So I'm going to go off script here. We were supposed to have one more question, and it was about laneway housing. And I'm going to adjust the content of the question a little bit and give each candidate 1 minute to answer. We've had a number of laneway houses. Everybody's spoken to those. As a community, we supported laneway housing as a good way to increase density and keep the fabric of the community healthy. And what's been happening is we're getting laneway houses of 1,250 square feet instead of something that is actually a granny flat with 2 bathrooms, an ensuite, 2 bedrooms, etc., etc. It causes parking and other issues. I have pictures here if anyone wants to see them, and I have encouraged everyone to go and look at design guidelines on City of Calgary site, because the intent is great. The intent is good. Nice little houses for grandma or a nanny in the back lane. What we're getting is something like that that looks like a house out in a suburban area. That's not a laneway house. So I know everybody gets stuck in the middle of pointing, and I don't want you to point any fingers. I just want you to answer this question. Could you speak to your view on the future of lane houses in established communities? 1 minute. And the first speaker, Brent was first last time, is Dean.
Wow. 2 firsts. I think, that's going to sound like a broken record, is develop the rules within the community association, live by the rules. And if somebody builds something they're not supposed to, take it down. Go back to what you've said you were going to build, which will comply with all the rules and regulations for your community.
It is that simple. We have to enforce the regulations, and the regulations have to be more than just numbers as well. There has to be consultation with the neighbors because there is ability to make better decisions if you include the neighbors. It's not a veto, it's about making a better decision with the regulations and ensuring that the neighbors' issues are being taken care of as best as possible. So follow the regulations and engage the neighbors, the immediate neighbors, both sideways and back, of course, and go from there. That's essential. And if you don't do that, that means there are no rules. It's the wild, wild west, and that's just not appropriate for a city. And frankly, this whole idea that the city has its own mantra, and that's why we don't respect ARP, that is not appropriate. The reason we have area redevelopment plans, if they're not appropriate, we need to go back to the community and work with the community to make sure that what the city whole intent is being able to incorporate in the ARP is great. So everyone has the same rules, and we don't have to break them piecemeal. Thank you.
I think a second, more comprehensive solution would be a little bit better. An office that has home inspectors as well as people who monitor for Airbnb rentals. One of the issues with having laneway houses is once again that they have a sneaky way of bouncing it through council and putting in these, as you can see, monoliths into your area, and then of course increasing densification, increasing your tax burden. Plus, a lot of times the infrastructure isn't upgraded, so sewage and water doesn't accompany any of the upgrades on the laneway house. So I think a special office that would address these needs, plus an anonymous tip line, so if it was a neighbor that was complaining about it, and if it did render somebody homeless, that office should work with the Calgary Housing Corporation in terms of finding them a place to live outside of that area.
So part of the question was, what do you look at the future at laneway homes?
Yep.
Now I think originally the thought of laneway homes was Mackenzie Town Square. They're little apartments, studio apartments on top of the garage. And they weren't intrusive and they're quite lovely. And that whole area has them. But then it got out of control and there are no rules. And you should have rules first before you start development. So everybody has a level playing field so they know what's allowable and what's not. Houses in some areas, you phone in, you get a relaxation. Instead of 20% of the lot, you can build on 70%. And if you complain as a neighbor, you're a bad neighbor. So that's got to stop. The rules have got to stick to the rules. And laneway homes are possible if we go back to the model that it was originally planned for.
Well, I've always been supportive of laneway houses. I've seen some really great examples in other cities. Vancouver does them beautifully. And so I was promoting them, and I agree with you. The size of them, the impact has been very distressing. That's why I brought forward a notice motion asking for laneway housing guidelines and rules. Vancouver's are brilliant. The second story is smaller than the first. They have to be a certain size. They're very charming. They put eyes on the street. They create a safer laneway. And we could look at that example. Seattle's are even better. And what I said when I made my motion at council was progress happens at the speed of trust. So we got a new form for Calgary. We know that it can be done well in other places. Let's build trust by doing them well here. One area where I think we could look at bigger laneway houses is for heritage preservation. So if we could somehow save the main house with laneway units in the back, I think we should look at that.
The next portion is the questions that have been submitted by the audience. If you've got questions that you haven't handed in yet, please do so. I'm just going to walk up to an individual, ask them to draw a question, and give them, I believe it's 2 minutes to answer. If you could do it faster, that would be even better. Are there papers at the back? Somebody at the back bring papers up? Got some, thank you. Okay, I'm going to start with Brent, and I'm just going to go down the line in one direction. Pick one of these questions. I'll read it for you. The city's 2017 report on climate change says that existing actions do not put Calgary in a position to meet its current GHG reduction targets in the near and long-term future. Specifically, what would you do differently to achieve these targets?
Thank you very much. There are several things that we can do to change how we are approaching this issue. One is that right now there is approximately $40 million of money coming every year to the city from our utility. It's not going towards addressing this issue, and it's going to Parks and Rec, etc. Now, I don't begrudge the Parks and Rec getting the budget, but really we should be addressing this issue. And some of the ways we can do so is to improve the tie-in for our microgenerators of both wind and solar to ensure that they're getting fair rates, and so solidify those contracts, and ensure as well that new communities have plans for community generation community heating plans. That's a very efficient way to do heating of units. Now, that's not going to impact Ward 7. What does impact Ward 7 and our ability to meet our goals is to ensure that we actually have complete communities. And that means that we have the services and we also have the infrastructure we need here for community, whether it's our libraries, whether it's our community facilities, so that we're not going. For example, Montgomery actually goes to Rocky Ridge for their home ice, even though there's shoal ice right there. And that's because we are overburdened in the inner city relative to our population and the lack of facilities. But we don't have anybody who really cares about whole communities at this point in time. We need somebody who understands urban planning, urban design, and the way everybody lives, and fit everybody into our community, and not just the few. Thank you.
Thank you. This is also your opportunity to use a wild card if you want to rebut. You want to rebut?
Yeah.
What card?
To the point to Mr. Alexander point, and I think he did speak quite well on the issue. One thing that I really liked, and as my campaign team kind of put together, is something that Germany and when I looked at Japan, they allowed them to do, and something that currently I don't believe the city of Calgary allows, is putting up solar panel and allowing people to feed back to the grid to actually reduce their own costs and reduce and basically get paid for power generation once they've done enough power generation for themselves. I think that's something that would help Calgarians out. Sadly, it would take probably a lot of money out of the pockets of NMAX, but and so go taxes, I suppose. But I think it'd be good for people to be able to put up secondary sources of energy on their homes in order to pay off some of their existing housing and energy costs.
Thank you. Jim, you have a question? How will you support low-income Calgarians?
I can tell you right now that we've started an initiative to help support the remaining residents of Midfield Park. We've started a GoFundMe page just today. We've helped bring a lawyer into the equation, looking for an injunction against the City of Calgary to stop what's happening at Midfield Park, which is just one more example of what's going on with City Council. And we want to stop what's happening. There's roughly 100 people left up in Midfield Park that in 2.5 weeks are going to be homeless. We need to put a stop to that. And I think just what we're doing with Midfield Park is a perfect example. We have a number of people like that in the city. Let's stop homelessness. And what we also have to do, there's a number of buildings in the city. Shamrock Hotel is a perfect example. It's been boarded up for a couple of years now. Why not convert that to affordable housing of some maker description? There's a number of those sorts of buildings around town that are sitting empty, boarded up. Let's make better use of them and help end our homelessness.
Thank you. We have a card, Drew?
Thank you. Midfield Park was one of the most difficult decisions this council has ever had to make. Right now, there are 8 households remaining in Midfield Park. No one will be pushed off that park. No one will be homeless. The city is working extremely hard to ensure that everybody there has a home, whether they're moved to another mobile home park or into affordable housing, which many of them need, with services, social services. The city is partnering with many agencies, turning over land. We've just turned over 7 large parcels of land, including one in Parkdale, to Performance Arts Lodge, which is for retired low-income artists and musicians. That'll be going in the Parkdale Park and Ride. Thank you. And the community will be involved in the planning of that very special affordable housing development.
I must say that's good news. I've been asking about that since May 2016. Merrick wants to answer, rebut, and then I'll come back to Brent.
I find it kind of ironic that a solution is being inflicted on Midfield without the permission of the residents, and on good word from the residents that I have been working with, they basically don't want to be perceived as rich in this. The second, there is no mobile home parks that have room for a lot of these people in Midfield. A lot of them have actually been forced out of the city. Much like Mayor Klein shipped a lot of homeless people to Vancouver, it's kind of happened with a lot of the residents of Midfield. Second, the city did have a plan for them. In a heavily redacted file that I have and I can give you access to, the city actually had a second park built for these people and eventually decided not to take them there. That plan also included the second park that was zero cost to the city and zero cost to the taxpayers. It would have been revenue neutral in terms of what the city would have to put in. Those people were kicked out unjustly. And the people who are staying there are basically not going there because at this point they have either their businesses on the line or in some cases, as Rudy Prediger, who's the president of the co-op, his wife died in that home and he is not leaving.
Thank you. There are several things that we need to do more appropriately in regards to dealing with our low-income Calgarians. One is housing. Well, we mentioned a mere 7 properties that are being handed over from the city to housing organizations. They're being sold. They're not even being handed over. This is the base equity for these not-for-profits, and to be able to go to the province and the federal government. If we're not being serious, and I trust you, we're not being serious right now in regards to homelessness from the city's position. We are going to continue this homeless issue for years to come. The other item is flat taxes. The green bin got rolled out, and if you're in a 4-plex, you are paying the same amount as somebody who's in a 2.5-acre mansion in Mount Royal for your service. Flat taxes are subsidies from the poor to the rich. It is completely inappropriate. It's not about the service, it's about the tax. We have to improve and correct these issues because that $6.50 a month is a grandfather's return ticket to see his grandchildren every month. That's not something that comes across if you're not poor, but if you are poor, it's a massive intrusion on how they can live. The second one is issues like fluoride. This is a massive issue for the poor. They're the ones most impacted when they don't have dental services. They're less likely to be able to access proper dental care. And yet we've taken away because we want to give them choice, which is crap. It's absolute utter crap. We have to make sure that when decisions are made, the impact of everybody is considered and not just the few. The last is respect for our contracts and a reference back to Midfield. We make contracts with individuals and citizens, and if we don't respect them, we have to work with them to come up with an alternative contract that everyone can live with, not voice it on them, an alternative that works only for the city. Those are some of the areas that we can work better for low-income Calgarians.
Drew, you can choose a question. Spending, what will you do to improve local art? If your answer is to not spend money on art, then you have failed this question. Question is, without cutting spending, what will you do to improve local art?
This. While we talk about art, and it's about 0.5%, I know it's called the 1% policy, but really is about 0.5% of a capital project. That particular piece of art, the Beaufort Towers, which I'm not all that fond of, I have to say. The bigger question was the 99.5% of what we were spending the money on. So the interchange was because we paved over Pascaboo slopes. So I think I hope we don't lose track of the big dollars, the big capital spends, and have value for money for all of those projects. As far as the art is concerned, we need to do better. When I first read about Beaufort Towers, I thought, what were they thinking? Especially with Indigenous. We have white goose flying. It's one of the most remarkable reports on healing our relationship with our Indigenous people that I have ever seen. And we have an opportunity to have our Indigenous people, Calgarians, telling their own stories. And so we shouldn't tell their stories for them. We should have them tell their stories and share them with us, that shared history. So I've written a significant paper on what I think is wrong with our public art policy. I believe in it. I think it's important that we have art and beauty in our city and we delight our citizens. But how we have approached this art is really treating it, the city, as a collection rather than a city building exercise through art. We could even use art as a way to heal damaged spaces. So if we have an underpass, for example, that's scary and dark, we can use art to improve it and lighten it. We can use art that's usable. We can use art that has bike racks and benches. These are the things that we need to talk about as a public art policy. We don't have it right yet. I don't want to lose art because we've made a couple of really high-profile mistakes.
Good question. Yeah. The Calgary community is in the midst of an economic downturn. Tens of thousands of people in the private sector out of work. At the same time, the City of Calgary's not paused any spending. Taxes continue to rise annually, and the public sector spending is not showing any signs of abatement during this time. How do you intend to address overall city budgeting in the next 3 years?
Wow. I see the question. Yeah. That's a mouthful. To be perfectly honest, I'd love to be the candidate that comes up here and says, I'm going to lower your taxes, it's going to go rock bottom, nobody pays taxes anymore, we're all home free. The reality is the City of Calgary, as we've delved into it, is notoriously opaque in terms of how much it's spending. We have no real idea. I mean, they have these beautiful wish lists. I couldn't honestly tell you the real answer here. Public sector spending isn't showing any signs of abatement. I think the first understanding that as a councillor I would have to do is get an understanding of where the costs are going. We really don't know. Anytime we've pulled any of the financials from the City of Calgary, they're very vague, and if they have given us any or the more details, they're heavily redacted. Like I see 90% blank pages, and I'm really not kidding. I can prove all that. I can't say if I'm going to lower taxes or raise taxes. I have no idea what the financial picture looks like. We know that we spend $3.65 billion a year in the City of Calgary on budget. We spend a couple of million here or there on art. We've spent a couple of million here. We can't find it in our hearts to give artists some more money, but darn, we're going to give the Flames whatever they need, 313, 500 million, sky's the limit, which comes out of taxpayers' money. The real answer here is it's probably something that nobody here wants to hear is, I don't know, because nobody really knows unless they get to the position. But even if you are in the position, as Sean Choos said in the last council meeting before the election was called, he doesn't know. He's been asking city managers and directors the cost of running the Green Line, the cost of green power to the city, and he's being stonewalled by the people inside the city. The city of Calgary doesn't know what it's doing, and the people who are making the decisions don't know what they're doing because they just don't know. So I'd love to say, I'm going to lower taxes. The reality is, I don't know, because nobody knows. And it's getting worse because it's so opaque.
We need to start using your dollars more effectively. We need to do some smart spending. No raises for councilmen or council people. The transit is losing ridership because nobody has jobs. So maybe we should start saying no to some of these big billion-dollar projects. Maybe we can't do the Green Line next year or after 2019 if the NDP win again. All these city managers going to Disneyland, $800,000 to learn how to say no. Say no. Namshi wants to hire someone for $200,000 to run the city council meetings. Maybe we have to look at a new mayor who will actually run the city council meetings. That's $200,000 we can't afford. So all these big projects, we have to start looking at them seriously, and we can't afford them. People can't afford more taxes. They can't afford less services. They still want services. And they looked at this art project. I've heard about art project every day. Why wasn't a Calgarian offered, or a Canadian? Why at least they keep the money back into Canada? Why does New York architects making money off of Calgary? It is wrong. What's wrong with ACAD? We have a fabulous school. We have the best looking at electrical boxes in Canada. We don't have MacTac. We have them hand painted by students here. We need to start looking at what's happening in Calgary, and we have to start saying no to big projects we cannot afford.
One more rebut down here.
City of Calgary has some of the highest business taxes in Alberta, and the gap is widening between personal and business taxes. We have a small family-run restaurant on 16th Avenue who spent money, invested in his business, and he got slapped with a $3,500 a month tax increase. That's ridiculous, and no small business can absorb that sort of increase in their taxes. We got to start controlling our spending. Our issue isn't money coming in, it's money going out. So we need to change the other side of the equation. And I think the first thing we should do is lead by example. Councillors should accept the 5% decrease in salaries. In my personal opinion, I think councillors should be on a 4-year contract responsible for their own payroll taxes, for all of their own taxes, benefits, and pension. City councillors, 4-year contract, you get voted in, here's a 4-year contract, you're responsible for all your own costs. That takes away, I think, a number of people who get in this for the wrong reason.
Okay. Margot, you have a question to choose. What changes would you try and make to Calgary to make it a more livable, modern city? Think that extra two. What changes would you try and make to Calgary to make it a livable, modern city?
I think Calgary's a great livable, modern city. We have 17th Avenue, we've got lots of parks, we have lots of green space. I live off of Crescent Road, you can walk down to Princess Island Park. I think in Ward 7 we have a really great modern city. I'd like to see more businesses start up. This too, high taxes. I don't want to see more business going under. The city needs to make it more livable. You've got to get more people working and more entrepreneurship. And if we really started lowering our business tax, get more people starting businesses, more people hired, a lot more people going out to dinner, a lot more people going to coffee shops and using our city, and which is great. We have a great livable city. We have great theater, we have a great zoo, we have a Glenbow Museum, we have some of the best scenery in the world is here, and clean air, clean water. I think we have a great livable and a fabulous modern city.
Okay, your next challenge, you're each going to get a question, and you're going to get 1 minute to speak on these questions. And I'm going to start with Dean. Does anyone else have a question to hand in? Just raise your hand, please. Got lots of them. The amount of meetings behind closed doors, 200 plus in Calgary versus Toronto 18. I feel this shows a lack of transparency, accountability, and democracy. What is your response?
Closed door meetings, I think, are crazy for a city council. We're a public entity. We're elected by the public. The public should be aware of what's going on. 200 in 1 year is, I don't know why. I don't know what they do behind those closed doors. Probably some of the same things they do when they redact all of those documents that Mark has been talking about. We need to stop that. That comes back to talking with the community associations, understanding what our constituents want, and moving forward, moving from the bottom up. No more of the top down. There's too much of that happening right now. We need to get back to a world where elected officials actually listen to their constituents and move things up the chain versus pushing their agenda down.
Who's going to respond?
Toronto has a completely different governance model than the City of Calgary. Toronto makes almost all their decisions in committee. The meetings, the Toronto City Council meetings, they've got 44 now, council members, last about a couple of hours. So I think it's really important when we look at numbers like that, that you look at apples and apples. 200 items. The City of Calgary buys land. We're required to go into camera for a number of reasons. We're required to go into camera, buying and selling of real estate. That makes a lot of sense. Personnel issues. We deal with a lot of personnel issues. And legal issues. That's protecting the corporation of the City of Calgary. So when we go into camera, we make a vote. We vote on that. Sometimes I don't support going in camera. I didn't with the arena. I didn't with the Olympics. It was important that we discuss that in public. The majority of council didn't agree. But when that report that came out, it was really important that we talk about what's the difference between Toronto and Calgary. Yes, transparency is important. Yes, we should be talking about the things that matter as much as possible in public. There are some things we're absolutely required to speak in private.
Thank you. As I'm going down the line, Drew also gets the next question. What is one piece of specific legislation you will work to get passed if you're elected?
I can think of a dozen. We talk about taxes. I have never been a fan of market value assessment. It's not based on ability to pay. It's not based on services rendered. You can be penalized because your neighbor fixes up your property. But it is legislated by the province. So we have an opportunity. It's really once in a lifetime opportunity. It's something that Mayor Dewar worked on before Mayor Boncagné, which is a city charter. So the city charter, we have an ability to talk about a different way to raise our taxes. We can turf market value assessment and look at something that's fairer, that's more affordable, that doesn't penalize you from fixing up your home. That is, if we were able to do that, that would make a huge difference to Calgarians. That would be what I'd concentrate on.
Mark? What is your stand on accepting large campaign donations from developers, wouldn't you wish, from developers and lobbyists and private corporations in your riding needing your approval for projects?
Well, there's the Mark answer, which is it's bad. Then there'd be the Mark answer, which has bags of money in front of them, and you can do other things that go, well, I don't know. The reality is, I think that the process needs to be transparent. And as long as you know who's donating to who, and that is clear, obvious, that is a very good way of understanding who's backing the candidates that are up front. When you look at the campaign donations from the last election, the only person's campaign donations that are heavily redacted are Drew's, unfortunately. You can take a look at Brent Alexander. You know, he is backed by community. There's some I don't know, there wasn't any developers actually. And quite to the point, Mr. Taylor, who was there as well, you saw all his donations. So I think that process needs to not only be transparent, but continue to be transparent post-election, so you know the history of the candidates that are running, and especially incumbents in that case.
Can you please determine and explain how you intend to display integrity regarding differentiating between needs and wants when it comes to spending our tax dollars wisely? Numerous spending has been deemed foolishly extravagant at the expense of those who are still homeless and many Calgarians still unemployed.
So a need is your roads. A need is be able to have transit. A need is your livability in the ward. A want is maybe a new $1 billion transit system. That's a want, but it's not a need at this point. The fact that ridership is going down and people are, matter of fact, people are driving more today, first time in years. They're using their car more to go downtown because there's parking. 1/3 of downtown is empty, and so people are not using transit. So we need to start rebuilding downtown. We need to start getting people working so that we be able to fill. That's a want, is work.
Thank you. Any wild cards? No? Some people used all theirs up. What does diversity in politics mean to you, and how do you plan to address the lack of diversity, especially women's representation on Calgary City Council?
Thank you. It might seem ironic, I'm trying to unseat one of the two women councillors, and yet I believe I can address this very easily. I've been on many boards, and what I am very proud of is bringing diverse voices onto the boards that I'm on. And that's not just at the board level, but also at the senior level of management. So that we do have the right knowledge flowing in. And frankly, I've never been on a board where women are not eminently qualified to be on those boards. So to be able to make sure that we have gender balance when possible, i.e. when roles come up and we can change that balance, it always works, and it always works in favor of the organization as a whole. We have been failing, though, in our organization, being the city, especially at the senior management. Of the 8 director positions that have come available from women retiring and or otherwise moving on, only one of them has been replaced by another woman. Every man who has been retired has been replaced by another man. We have been going down in our gender diversity, and this is very important to address on every level. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a lot of questions that are related to Parkdale planning. I'm going to start at this end this time and just do the same thing, 1-minute answer. And then there's a few questions that are for all candidates that I'll hold till the end. So pick one. How do you feel about planning for older residential neighborhoods, turning single-family homes into large complexes?
So I really respect the zoning of the area. So this is an R2 zoning. I respect the R2 zone. And it should not be changed unless the community wants it to be redeveloped into MCG or into multifamily dwellings. I think that a lot of seniors are feeling pushed out. They feel that they're losing value of their home. A lot of people bought in this area as an R2 and want to stay as an R2, and I would totally respect that. And as a councillor, it should be your area. It is about your residential area. And large complexes bring a lot of parking problems, a lot of other issues that seniors or other people in older homes, their taxes are being raised, which is pushing them up. Sorry.
I'll go to Drew and then I'll come back to Mark. Calgary has adopted a 10-year poverty reduction strategy to reduce the number of Calgarians living in poverty, called Enough for All. How will you support implementation of this strategy?
If you haven't seen this strategy, it's extraordinary. And it was developed with the leadership of the city, but with many, many stakeholders throughout the variety of social service sectors. And we have a responsibility to act. We have an opportunity with this Enough for All to make a difference in people's lives. We're talking about a living wage. We're talking about affordable housing. That means affordable housing in every neighborhood, even if it's inconvenient. It means it means treating people with respect and recognizing poverty as an issue that impacts us all. Because really, the important part is in the name. In a city like Calgary, we do have Enough for All. And so I urge you to look at the details of this. It has hundreds of action items, but we have a responsibility to ensure that they're enforced and acted upon. Thank you.
Got the longest question. Everybody keeps talking about following the rules of redevelopment, i.e. laneway houses. The rules are set out in bylaws. The bylaws are written such that development authority can use discretion in determining whether a laneway house impacts the neighboring home in a negative way, as well as reduction in property value to neighbor homes is not a consideration. So the rules or bylaws are needing to be rewritten. What would you do?
Let's get kind of a two-tier answer, really. One, the rules are meant to be in place and to be set and enforced, and ultimately it's up to us as neighbors and good neighbors to help enforce those rules. Second, in communities as tight-knit as Parkdale, it's definitely up to the neighbors to also report when they see infractions. It's not just, the house down the street that looks ugly. It's a matter of talking about it to city bylaw. So in terms of being rewritten, I haven't seen the bylaw, to be honest, in terms of what the development authority can use as discretion. The discretion is a pretty wide open plane, and it needs to be narrowed down. And I think to Mr. Alexander's point and Mr. Dean's point, that there needs to be a stronger enforcement in terms of if the rules are set out, those need to be followed. And if they aren't followed, they definitely need to be reported on. So that would be following and making sure that the bylaws were enforced in that way.
Thank you. There's about 6 more questions on density and laneway housing and duplexes. I'm not going to have them repeat them. So try one of these. Yeah, you're next. Parkdale had a vision for a mixed-use community to be developed on underutilized crown lands at the western edge. Approximately 5 acres. The former vehicle registries building was sold without taking it to market. Sold millions below market value to a non-taxable entity. How will you help Parkdale realize its vision of a walkable community? Not sure they link together, but they're talking about the motor vehicle lands to the west was sold without any consultation with the community. Is there something you could do about that?
Thanks. Not now, no, unfortunately. Not that the city doesn't break contracts all the time, but no, I suspect the contract is set and there's nothing we can do about the sale of that in particular piece. But I have to reemphasize the need for this whole community planning, because that is what we're talking about. We don't have a plan for the way we want to develop our communities as a whole. We have all these little plans, whether it's bikes or pedestrian safety or even safe streets, that don't even talk to each other. They're in their own little silos. Let alone whole community planning that we're talking about, where it's walkable community, where there you have the facilities or even the mix of development and commercial versus residential that you want to have, and that we include everybody in our communities. We need those whole community plans to be able to do that, so that when something does happen like this, we can hold the city to account in regards to how is it fitting.
So that's kind of an unfair question because the province owned that land. The province doesn't have to consult with us. They still own some of the land. And the Planning and Development Committee has some vision of walkable mixed-use space for that area, but we don't control the land. So if you see it up for sale, let us know. What is your stand on bike lanes and the 10-cent size traffic circles?
Bike lanes. Oh, that's a loaded gun. I'm all for bike lanes. I think the way that it was planned, if that's truly what happened, is probably one of the issues. I think there's better ways to have done it. There are people in our ward who are adversely affected because a bike lane now prevents them or their family from parking anywhere. There are people who, if you want to move, basically your movers are going to have to park across the street if they can find somewhere to park. So we need to think about them differently. We need to think better. Bike lanes are great. I love the bike lanes over in the Netherlands. I'd ride those all day long. But here, they seem to have been done with some issues and not thinking through where they put them and how they make them work or not. The 10-cent traffic circles, traffic calming as they're called, waste of time and money in my books. I think a four-way stop works just fine if that's what you're trying to do.
Thank you, Dean. I'm going to ask the same question because it says all candidates. I've got about 4 of them like this, so you only have 30 seconds to respond, because you're all going to say the same thing. Do you support corporate welfare, such as subsidizing the Calgary Flames as extensively as proposed last week? Do you support corporate welfare, such as subsidizing the Calgary Flames as extensively as proposed last week? And we'll just start at this end.
I'm a fiscal conservative, and I do not believe in subsidizing the arena at all, not at taxpayers' expense, no.
I'd argue somebody should subsidize my wine store. I do more social good with that than the Flames in some cases. No, we shouldn't subsidize. Public money should never be used for private corporations, and in this case, definitely not.
I support the gift of land, and that's really where I stop. The city's offer, in my view, was too generous, and I have voted against every offer that the city's made. We know the profit that the Flames make is substantial, and so we're being asked to partner, and to me a partner means you share in risk and you also share in reward. And what's before us right now is purely the city taking on the risk and the Flames taking the reward. That's not a partnership.
I am how he gives more to the community. couple of weeks ago, the Flames had a charity golf tournament, raised $400,000 in a day. 40 to 50 times a year, they donate $40 to $50,000 out of 50-50 profits to the community. They do wonderful things. They're a part of our culture. We need to find a way to, yes. Does that mean corporate charity? No. But we need to find a way to make this work.
This question gets back to evidence-based decision making. How are we making decisions? And if we look at the evidence, Canadian teams, by and large, whether it's Vancouver, Ottawa, Montreal, or Toronto, all built their own arenas on their own dime. Calgary is no different. Calgary is even larger than Ottawa, which is actually building their second arena in 25 years. This is a business decision. They need to take a business risk. We can get involved if we have excess land, and I do believe we have excess land in at least 3 different areas that would make sense. But beyond that, not a cent, no cash. We need to encourage businesses to engage in their business, but not take on the risk. Thank you.
We'll start in the middle this time. Same question to everybody. Do you feel that the current City Council is functioning well? If not, what would you do if elected to contribute to a more effective working dynamic? I'm going to hand it to Drew first. She knows more.
Okay. You read about the acrimony, but when you look at the decisions that the city's made with the Green Line, even passing a budget, generally it's consensus. So all of council supports many of the really large decisions. Yeah, we argue and we sometimes don't like each other, but that's human nature. And what I find wonderful about Calgary's council and the fact that we don't have parties is that you see a variety of opinions and tension, and at the end of the day you end up making a better decision.
Well, they certainly function well. I mean, they redact almost everything, so you have no idea what they're really doing. That's pretty clear. If I were elected to contribute to a more effective working dynamic, just elect me and we'll figure this out, I'm sure. It would help, I think, to make it a little more transparent, frankly. It would give more community input and give every resident of Calgary actually a clear idea of where council's going, where they're heading, as opposed to sort of this redacted nonsense that we keep pulling.
New blood, new councillors. There's going to be 4 new ones, and maybe just a change up of people that shouldn't be there anymore. And that will bring a whole new vision and a whole new direction that the city really needs. So new blood.
Thank you. I've worked on many boards, and you can choose a board, or hopefully you choose a board that I can work on, but you should never choose who you work with on that board. It goes back to the societal issue of only working with the people that already agree with you. As they say on a team, if you have 2 people already agree with you, then you have 1 too many people on that team. So we have to make sure that flow of communication and discussion happens amongst everybody. It's not about acrimony, it's about working together. I've been on those boards where you go in and you are slammed down, but I've also ended up at leadership positions on those same boards because I'm willing to work with everybody.
Does our current council work well? I would say no. I think there's been all sorts of evidence and discussion over that already. What we need to do is get back to listening to our community and having our meetings out in the open. Get rid of the small, and frankly, the excuse that business is done in closed-door meetings, that shouldn't be done. That should not be done by council anyway. The business should be done by the administration. They're the ones that are doing that should be doing the business behind closed doors, and the council should be approving policy and final decision.
Same question to everybody because we have it asked a number of times. What is your position on the fluoridation of Calgary's drinking water?
I'm decidedly pro-fluoride after meeting with a number of citizens, especially on the lower income group, who have had kids who have five, 7, as young as 3 with root canals. For $1 a day or $1 a year for every citizen to put fluoride back. There's also no scientific evidence whatsoever that supports that there's any danger of fluoride at that level to anybody, or fluoridosis, which is the toxification of fluoride in your body. I am pro-fluoride.
Fluoride is a natural occurring mineral. It's in 3/4 of the water in the world. The reason why Calgary does not have fluoride because of the limestone watershed, and that's why we have to add it to our water. Absolutely, fluoride, not only for children's teeth, it also helps in the absorption of calcium for seniors in the prevention of osteoporosis. I've talked to many doctors at the doors, health people, said it was crazy, it came out, it should go back in immediately. Thank you.
The issue of fluoride is a massive one for 2 reasons. One is no one ever ran on this issue 2 terms ago, and yet it became the top issue of our current councillor to take it out. And at the same time, refused to look at or consider any actual evidence, either side that supported fluoride, whether the sides being public health, dental, or medical. The university even offered, the medical school offered to do a full review of all the information, provide a report for consideration, and it was refused. This is inappropriate, to say the least.
Totally for, and I've got my dentist to thank for that. The last time I went in for a cleaning, she gave me an earful. She told me basically all the issues and facts and whatnot. And the one major point she made is her business has skyrocketed, and it's purely because of the fluoridation coming out of the water, and the health of children's teeth have just deteriorated immensely over the last year. Edmonton have not taken fluoride out of their water, and their dental health is far superior to ours at this point in time.
Thank you. Well, if you look at the numbers, tooth decay rates in Alberta are increasing across the province, regardless of fluoridation. So are we talking about fluoride? Or are we talking about dental health? And if you look at places where they're having success, like Europe, many, many places in Europe, don't fluoridate their water. They talk about choice, a principle of choice, but they offer whole dental health. And that's what we don't have in Alberta. Dental care has been priced out of the reach of the average middle-class family in Alberta. We have the highest dental rates in the country.
There's one basic reason why dental cavities are going up everywhere, and it's because of the lack of dental care due to economic crisis, and people are losing their benefits. That is the reason why it's going up across the province, because we're all suffering from the same economic situation. It's not for any other reason. Fluoride is added in Germany into the salts that you buy. It's added into milk and many other places in Europe. So to pretend that the issue of fluoride is about choice, when all the information is quite to the contrary, that is a public health benefit for all, is really trying to dance around the actual issue.
We said we'd wrap up at 9 o'clock. We have about 20 minutes. So this last question is for everybody before you give your closing comments. It's on flood mitigation. It's about, the wording is, what is your position on flood mitigation options, and will you commit to progressing projects? So I'm just going to read some of the other comments. Many believe that flooding such as Calgary experienced will be more frequent in the future. Calgary has a number of flood projects underway or planned. Please outline your position, and will you commit to those projects as a high priority? I'm just going to start down with Margot.
We definitely need to look into the flood mitigation that happened here. And we do need to start building berms and start looking at possibly that we may have this again. Also, we also need to protect our green spaces because green spaces work as a natural absorption of water. So we keep concreting over and developing on the banks. At one time, as a planning student, you weren't supposed to build on the banks of the Bow River because of the softness of the dirt, and that there would cause some serious problem with flooding, which happened. So,
After talking to a number of first responders at the last flood, I would keep City Council out of flood mitigation. Their number one frustration was, the first responders' biggest frustration was Mayor Nenshi, followed by numerous councillors giving their 2-3 cents in. Let the experts do what they need to do. Let them build what they need to build, as long as it's within budget and makes sense. City Council interfering in it was actually more of a hindrance, and it also caused property damage.
Well, that's very strange. State of emergency, the responsibility is taken away from council and it's given to the fire chief, who has the leadership and can make all the decisions. Flood resiliency is the top issue for the city. It's easy to forget because it's 2013 and we start forgetting, and that's human nature. But it really is one of our top issues, if not our top issue. And council has agreed that it's our top issue. We have made some progress, especially in the river communities of Sunnyside, but we have so much more to do, and we need to work with other orders of government to ensure that we work until the job's done.
I think this is one of the great examples of analysis to paralysis. There's been so much of that done. We need to start making some decisions and moving forward. Much of the work that's been done in Sunnyside has been more to protect city assets versus the public assets. We need to change that. We need to work on fixing everything and make a decision and let's move forward. 3 years and next to nothing has been done. 4 years and next to nothing has been done. We need to change that model and get something done. It's going to happen again.
Thank you. The dry dam is part of the solution, but it's many, many years, probably 10, 15 years down the pipe. We need to deal with issues like the Princess Island Causeway, which was intended to be one that blows out to allow for more water flow around the island, but it was not designed properly and doesn't do that. We have to redesign that. We need to ensure that the riverbeds throughout the most pressing areas are properly cleared of bars, gravel bars. That hasn't been done since the flood, and yet it's been shown that Sunnyside is at more risk because of this issue. We also have to improve the berms, which have been identified as a primary concern from Center Street to 10th Street. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Are there any other pressing questions? I think we've covered the whole gamut. I'll take 2 from the floor, and then we're going to have closing. Down at the end.
I just have one for Mr. Farrell there. Councillor Farrell, in the past you have publicly denied any wrongdoing in the lawsuit against you brought forward by Torigno Investments. Given the over 100 pages of evidence that is now on public record, you continue to deny the allegations.
I think that's a legal question. Does Drew want to answer it? It's in the courts.
I can answer a little bit of it. The court's being used as a weapon by this family. And I was representing my communities. The Planning Department, the Calgary Planning Commission, both said, refuse this application. What I did was I moved those recommendations based on the input from the Community Association. The community's being sued as well. Community volunteers are being sued as well. So to be able to use the court as a weapon to prevent, 1, somebody from running for office, and 2, to intimidate them from doing their job is absolutely a disgrace.
One question. Are you on a candidate's team? No? Okay.
I'd just like to bring up the point that Ms. Farrell made, that the study referenced by Lawrence McLaren, conducted at the University of Calgary, in partnership with the U of A, she completely misrepresented it, respectfully. Obviously, it's true that dental cavities are increasing in both cities. But if you actually read the study, and I'd like to ask you if you have actually taken the time to read the fine print of the study, it says that there is a statistically significant difference attributable to fluoridation between, for tooth decay between Calgary and Edmonton, and it's causing all sorts of health issues. Tooth decay is...
Is that your question? Did she read the study?
Yes.
Okay.
I did read the study, and I had scientists read the study. If you've read the study, it shows that Calgary and Edmonton are pretty much on par. They really are. I agree with what Brent said. You look at some of the most successful cities and countries in Europe, and they're making huge strides in dental health. That's what this is about, is dental health. They offer choice, so yes, fluoridated salt, but they offer dental care. No amount of fluoride is going to say that you don't need to take your kids to the dentist. They can't afford it. In Alberta, we don't have a fee schedule. We don't have a fee guide. Every other province in Canada has a fee guide. So middle-class families can't get to the dentist. It's a health issue.
Thank you. So I've got random numbers in here, and I would like each candidate to pick one, and that's going to be the order of your final comments. Don't think you can see them, but I'll go down to Brent first. I don't break my neck. Number 3, okay. Five. Yes. Didn't have much of a random order. 1, 2, 4, 5, and 3. Okay. So this is a wrap-up of your closing comments, and tell us what you are going to bring to City Council if you're elected, and how you can represent this community. The time is 2 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight, and to Bill and the Parkdale Association, thank you for putting this on. You heard tonight why I think I can best represent you. First, I believe we need a roadmap to get this city working again. We need to market a world-class city that has lots of available lease space, an educated workforce, high-quality housing at reasonable prices, and an open-for-business attitude. Secondly, we need a bold plan to find ways to grow the tax base to pay for programs and services. We need to hold the line on spending, and what 0 future salary increases for councillors, we must lead by example. Third, we need a councillor that listens, answers your phone calls, and works with you to protect your communities and your home, the most important investment most people will ever make. Fourth, we need a councillor who believes government is there to work for you, not dictate to you. For example, you need to have a choice in parking passes, you need to have development regulations that are respected and enforced. The power is in your hands, and this election is the time to exercise it. Finally, I will do everything in my power to make sure we get good value for every dollar we spend. It's time for exciting leadership and enthusiasm to get Calgarians back to work and help make this city once again the pride of the West. But I can't do this alone. I need your help so I can work for you and deliver a new vision with fresh ideas at City Council. October 16, please vote for the right choice for change. Please vote for me. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.
When people get up to run in politics, they say the same thing. They're going to save you taxes, they're going to save you money, they're going to save the environment, and they're different. And then when they run, they spend their money on paper, steel, plastic. They put up lawn signs, hand out cards and paraphernalia. And they all do the exact same thing. We did a paperless campaign, and deliberately so. There's one way I need to show that I'm an out-of-the-box thinker. I'm relatively unknown. I am a true out-of-the-blue, out-of-the-box thinker. People who know me will testify to that. As opposed to the other candidates, any of the marketing paraphernalia you see from myself or from my campaign team is a direct line to me. There's no in-between. I get a lot of invitations for coffee, tea, not beer right now, but we do spend a lot of time talking to people one-on-one. I prefer that kind of relationship with residents. People who know me know that I prefer that relationship. And I'm there to take a look at your real problems. Not just pay lip service to them, not have some grandiose gestures. I'm here to talk to you and to understand what you want, and then represent that as best as I can in council. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for very thoughtful questions. I'm proud of my successes. Ending the sprawl subsidy, reinvesting Ward 7. Oh, you're going to hear that all over again.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out and listening to the debate tonight. It's an amazing opportunity to hear one voice on every question instead of cherry picking the way we talk to each other, and that's essential. The most important thing I think we need to do is reinstill trust in our systems, and that can only happen if we can trust our councillor. We need to ensure that they are not taking money from organizations that they can then turn around and benefit through changes at City Hall, whether it's relaxations or bylaw amendments or zoning changes. We need to make sure that they actually understand evidence-based decision-making and they're not playing lip service. And we have to do it in how we are living now. To suggest that we can change fluoridation because Europe does it better, but they have a completely different system, is unrealistic. We have to make sure it's based on how we actually live, and that's why you need somebody who's actually evidence-based decision-maker. We also have to make sure that our communities are planned as whole communities and not piecemeal. We need to ensure that when we are doing that, it is the community's interests that are at heart that we're planning together, and that those regulations and those plans are actually enforced and not used as stepping stone for further change that is outside what was originally discussed. Lastly, we need to make sure that the person who's actually making decisions on your behalf actually has the education and the work experience, whether it's urban design or an MBA that I have and working in the finance industry and across community organizations and various different sectors of our economy and not-for-profit organizations. I have that background to ensure that your interests will be looked at with the utmost concern and that the economic crisis that we're facing as a city are dealt with appropriately.
Thank you. I'm proud of my successes and the work that we've done together. Ending the sprawl subsidy, reinvesting Ward 7 tax dollars into aging public infrastructure, building complete streets and new strategies for safer pedestrian movement, so that whether you drive, bike, walk, use a wheelchair, a stroller or a cane, the city will be built with you in mind. Based on your feedback, I threw the first Pro-Child Trail plan back and fought for a better, more cost-effective plan with an award-winning, we just won an award last week, public engagement process. I continue to fight for flood mitigation to make sure that we remind council and other orders of government that we've come a long way, but we're nowhere near done. I held Calgary's Downtown Economic Summit to find ways to fill vacant office towers and kickstart the economy. We've streamlined our rules and we now have 4 office towers that are converting to residential. We now have a roadmap to bring life back to our core, but it won't happen overnight. It will take creativity and a lot of hard work. All of these projects required working with my colleagues to convince them that these were good ideas. So how do I get things done? I listen to the many stakeholders, work with community associations, residents, and businesses, bring the various parties together, and try to make the best decision possible for the long-term health of our city, based on all the information that I have before me. I would be honored to continue to fight for Ward 7 and the residents that live here. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. I know this is the start of a long process that we need to get right. I'm running for my first time for public office. I think I can make some great changes. I'm running with a clean slate, running with a lot of business experience, both as an employee, as an employer. We need to hold our public officials to higher standards. We need to I think it's a public service. I think 2 terms is more than enough. If you can't achieve what you think you need to achieve to make our city better in 8 years, perhaps you're in the wrong position. As a community, we need to get back to being more friendly, more cooperative, listening to our community, and make it easier to work with, to get things done, both as a community association, as developers, as builders, as people in the sporting world, as our kids in playing soccer, whatever it is. If we get back to working with our constituents, with our community associations, with businesses, the arts community, and all the other sectors who exist within our city that we need to work better with, we need to be partners with, not adversaries. It seems to me that there's been a lot of adversarial issues going on right now. People don't get along with the mayor, with current city council. We need to change that. We'll succeed together. We'll succeed as partners. And we need to elect a council to work with others. Not the current council who basically butts heads all the time. We need to try and create a city that fits our views, the views of the community, not the views of the few, but the views of a few. And on October 16th, I would ask that you choose your true conservative alternative in Ward 7, Dean Braun for Ward 7 Council.
Sounds like a lot of rehearsing time went into these exact 2-minute speeches. Thank you. This wraps up the evening. I want to thank the volunteers who made this happen. Thanks for your commitment to the community and to political activity. Thank you to the candidates. All I can say is stay well. I've been there. I ended up with pneumonia, but I won anyway. I have a long history, but at one point I was an elected official in Ontario. So, and thanks to all of you. By attending tonight, you're demonstrating you still have an interest in our community and in our city and in democracy. And it's wonderful to see you engaged. So I'm sure you'll get out and vote. I'll ask the candidates to stay around for a few minutes if you've got more questions. Otherwise, be safe when you go home. Thanks.
Right on the website.